from you. Well, that's all from me for now. With that, I'd like to bring on stage Dave Girouard, who's the president of enterprise at Google. Dave started his career at Accenture. He was doing systems integration work there. He moved to Booz Allen. Then he was at Apple. Then he was at a video search company called Virage. Dave joined Google in 2004, 6 years ago, just in case you're thinking the guy couldn't hold a job. And in 2007, he was key in the introduction of Google Apps. Now, last year, Dave told VentureBeat that I believe this year, Google Apps would be the Microsoft Office killer. Information Week was kind enough to brand him not totally nuts based on that prediction. I'm taking it on faith, Dave, so why don't you come on up and tell us your plan for world domination?
Thanks. It's great to start out introduced as not totally nuts, so I appreciate that. Just a little bit nuts, which might be good. Anyway, when we branded this event, we definitely anticipated sort of the soft, white, fluffy version of the cloud as opposed to the gray, stormy one. But even in Northern California, the weather doesn't always agree with you. But since we're all inside, we're going to make the best of it. But this event, when it came together, we had to think through a few things and what sort of event we wanted to create. You know, there's always a struggle about, is it just a general industry event? Is it an advocacy event? Are we advocating the cloud, or are we here to debate the cloud? And then the other sort of side of it, is it a Google event, or do we really want to make it an industry event? And there's no really pure answer to that. We want to make it a compelling event more than anything. Clearly, there are those of us who are very much bought into the cloud, and I think we'll be fairly transparent about that. But we do want to engage in the right sort of debate about the cloud, and we have invited a lot of folks from around the industry because we wanted to make it a very informed and a broad debate. But you're going to get plenty of Google as well. I think people, if they come to the Google headquarters, would leave disappointed if they didn't get to see some of the cool things in the works from Google. Cloud computing, wow. It's sort of at a level at which almost anybody in IT or in technology just hears about it almost minute by minute. And it has reached the level of kind of hype or meme that is almost unprecedented. And there's certainly something about cloud computing that pushes buttons on people more so than almost any other technology transition in history. You think about the coming of the PC into the large corporations when it was a mainframe-based world. You think about relational databases taking over from hierarchical databases, whatever sort of Wi-Fi networks coming in. All of those had elements of controversy and debate, but I'm not sure there's ever been one that has this amount of strident discussion and debate because it is so fundamentally disruptive to how things are done. And I think it's a testament both to how big and disruptive this can and will be, and of the many, many issues that need to be resolved before this really is all the way there. I think for those of us who are into cloud computing and have done this, we all have had at some point in time a cloud computing moment, where we sort of get this thing and we start to appreciate what is really neat and different about it. And even though it's not all perfect and there's shortcomings and all the apps and services aren't perfect yet, I think any of us can sort of identify a moment. And for me, it was 3 years ago. About 3 years ago, we had just launched these products. Google had already been on our own apps services for about 5 or 6 months at the time. And I went to a Giants game up in the city. And for those who know, I parked my car right by where they had the driving range. And if you know where that is, that was probably a slight lack of judgment in doing so. But I came out of the game, and no surprise, but my back window was broken, and my entire laptop bag was gone, and my passport, and my computer, of course, and everything else. And for most people, that is a traumatic thing. And again, losing my passport was a traumatic thing because I was leaving the country in a few days. But that aside, the interesting thing is I had the next morning a presentation to a large group, not quite this large, but a large group at 9 a.m. And I had done a lot of prep work, this and that. The beauty of the thing was, first of all, I lost nothing. There was no risk of data loss because there was little to no data on that computer. And there was no productivity loss. In fact, the next morning I got into work, and the most exceptional Google help desk folks were already at work at 8 in the morning. And I actually decided at that time I would switch from the PC to the Mac, which I had been I had left Apple years ago and sort of gone the other way entirely, and that was the start of my move back to the Mac. But it was really compelling that literally, without any loss of productivity and with no loss, not only to have no data loss, I could move to an entirely new PC desktop platform in once. And that to me was the cloud computing moment that said, wow, this is why this is really neat. This is why it's special. And I think people have different experiences. But the debate goes on. So what I want to do for a few minutes is just talk about the debate as it exists, and because I think we all hear about it so much. And then I am going to transition and talk about some of Google's specific viewpoints on the cloud and what we're going to try to do. So trust is the most central element of cloud computing, I think. It's gotten to the point where this is the ultimate question. Last fall, The Economist did sort of a survey and was actually part of a debate between Mark Benioff from Salesforce and Stephen Elop from Microsoft about, can you trust the cloud? And they both gave very passionate answers to that. And in the end, readers were asked to vote, and this is how it came out. Fairly split. And that may not be surprising to anybody. If you read the comments that were associated with it, the passion with which people wrote their comments and how they felt about this thing, to me, is what really jumped off the page as, can the cloud be trusted? That is fundamentally the question. And when you say, can the cloud be trusted, what you're really saying is, can I trust others to take care of these important parts of my business for me? Can they protect my data? Can they deliver a mission-critical service to me in a way that will not disrupt my business? Can I trust the way that they build new versions of the products and how they come out? And it's a very complicated question, and it's not one that's going to be answered overnight for every business. I should say, though, that it's interesting that Salesforce really has been in business for 10 years or so, and done an amazing job, really, as the flag bearers of cloud computing, the guys who were doing it pretty much before anybody, at least at scale, and a phenomenal track record. Cloud computing in its first 10 years has not had major catastrophes. It's not had enormous blow-ups. I mean, a service outage here and there, yes, but an amazing number of small businesses, increasingly large businesses, have been benefiting from the cloud and getting a lot of the things the cloud promises. And we're now a decade into this. It's actually not entirely new. So I think it's a pretty compelling way to think about it. I'm going to show you a few quotes, and it's really telling. A lot of times the quotes say more about the person saying it than they do about the cloud, but I think it's fascinating to look at the way that some different parts of the industry look at this. Customers understand that cloud systems typically shine, it's not shining today, but their own in terms of reliability and security. Sometimes it can be fairly predictable. And we're pretty predictable, too. We're advocates for the cloud, just like Salesforce is. So you're going to hear consistent statements out of those of us who are true believers. Cloud computing, fundamentally about re-engineering the world's computing infrastructure to enable game-changing and even life-changing applications. I like this one. IBM. I've known Willie for years, and you can always count on IBM to take it out of the sort of knit and grit of IT up into the higher level of things like greener cities, smarter cities, what have you. And of course, IBM they're a little less concerned with what sort of ingredients go into your solution, or what sort of materials you use to build your house, provided that they're the general contractor. So it's a very IBM-like view on the world. Here's another one. Cloud computing continues to proceed on its merry way through the trough of disillusionment. You sort of picture somebody sitting at a kitchen table in the morning with bleary eyes looking at an empty bottle of whiskey or something when you read this. And maybe it won't shock anybody, a Gartner analyst. The trough of disillusionment. That's just quite a statement. Let's look at another one. Cloud computing is water vapor. This one, you don't have to guess. You probably all know this one, Larry Ellison. Now, Ellison's point really is, it's the same stuff, right? There's hard drives, there's middleware, there's databases, there's applications. What's the difference? The ingredients are all the same. And it's true. It is absolutely true. The ingredients are the same. It's the recipe that is very different. And I think the hard part that Larry has with all of this is that it is much more compelling from his perspective to sell the recipe than it is to bake the cake, which is the nature of cloud computing. The cloud will not be trusted with all aspects of computing. Almost hard to argue with this. It's a very measured statement from Mr. Elop from Microsoft. A very statesman-like, very clearly true, but obviously this is sort of the software plus services like, yes, we like this kind of sort of view. We're experiencing a disruptive moment in the history of technology with the advent of cloud-based computing. Stephen Elop again. Now we're leaning a little more to the all-in frame of mind. And it's hard. I mean, the world's evolving. This thing is changing fast. Cloud computing heralds an evolution of business that is no less influential than e-business. OK, now Gartner's kind of in the pool a little bit, at least another person at Gartner. You can't expect any large organization, whether it's Google or Gartner, anybody, to be entirely consistent. That's just not realistic. By 2012, 20% of businesses will own no IT assets. That, too, is Gartner. And now that's a compelling statement. It's probably fair to say, depending how you count businesses, that may be true today. I'm not sure many donut shops own a lot of IT assets. But having said all that, it's a pretty shocking statement, and I think it's interesting that it comes from Gartner. The debate about cloud computing has clearly changed, and I want to share a few thoughts on how it has changed over the years. And we were not really active participants, I would say, until 2007. We, Google, that is. So clearly, the starting point of cloud computing was cost savings. Why buy all this stuff? Why buy all the computers? Just subscribe and pay little bits per month and have at it. So it is clearly the starting point of cloud computing in the early and mid-2000s. Why not? It doesn't do what I need. It lacks the features and functions I need for any particular business process or what have you. Our users won't be happy. Our business processes can't be implemented, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a cost versus features and functions. And that is the very obvious, I think, starting point. That changed a bit. I think purely being about cost has changed because it began to occur to people that a lot of this was about speed and innovation, both in their business, how quick and agile a business can be in terms of adapting to conditions, in terms of its ability to access new technology without going through major upgrades and implementations and huge cost expenditures. So I think speed and innovation became central to cloud computing a few years ago. Now, what became the why not? As cloud computing moved into bigger businesses, this really started to drive customization. I need to customize to my business process. I need to integrate with my on-premise technology that I've invested a lot in and which is not going away. And I'm very concerned about whether these things will be reliable so I can depend on these for my employees. Where it is today, what I think, certainly in the Fortune 1000, what is driving cloud computing actually is getting beyond IT. It's getting into fundamental shifts in industries where we can tell and we see who's, obviously, where we sit, who is very interested in this and why they're very interested. And I really do believe it is about tectonic shifts in industries that are beyond the realm of IT, but IT really is heavily affected by that. Every large business today is affected by changes of the competitive dynamics in their industries, whether it's a regional business becoming a global business having to compete with low-cost providers from around the world, the ability to attract and retain people out of university when you need to do so. So a lot of changes about how businesses compete are trickling down to IT and the infrastructure you put in place to operationalize that business. And I think that is as much what's driving interest in cloud computing as anything else. And again, what's the fundamental question? It's trust. I think people are getting very comfortable with the fact that there's enough features and functions, this will work for me. And it's also all growing up so quickly that if we are missing something today, it's quite likely it won't be missing tomorrow. And I think even the reliability people are getting more and more confident in. While not perfect, I think it is absolutely true that the large cloud computing vendors can deliver services more reliable than your own. And I think people are really beginning to appreciate that. But the trust element is still there, and I think it is the final hurdle to cross before we can really make it there. I'm going to talk a bit about Google's sort of view on this, which again, is very from our point of view. We grew up in the cloud. We were born of the cloud. As a company, we didn't exist in the old world. So obviously, we think of it very differently than a lot of others do. Cloud computing, how is it defined? Actually, one of the biggest debates is just saying what is cloud computing and what isn't. And I always feel like this debate is a little more semantic than substantive. Whether you call something a private cloud or whether you just call it a virtualized data center, it doesn't matter that much. We do feel a little bit like the term was co-opted, frankly. But in the end, that's semantics. I think we do believe there will be, people will have on-premise and they'll own data centers for a long time. But for us, this is what cloud computing is: hosted. Hosted means somebody else owns it. And to us, this is actually fundamental. If someone's going to build you a big old cloud, that's not cloud computing in our world. The litmus test of cloud computing is someone else is spending a lot of CapEx, so you can spend just a little bit of OpEx when you need it on a relative basis. That, to me, is the litmus test of cloud computing. Shared infrastructure. So outsourcing and having somebody else just build it and run it for you, you get some of the benefits, but frankly, the economics don't really work at scale. You really need shared infrastructure. You need to be able to have all the compute power you need when you need it, and you need to not be paying for it when you don't need it. There's only one way that happens, and that's for that infrastructure to be shared amongst many tenants. And this is probably one of the parts that gives people the most heebie-jeebies about cloud computing, but I think people are starting to understand it. And delivered via the web browser. And this is really important because one of the important elements of cloud computing over time, as I will talk about in a minute, is the devices, the ability for users to access their information in ways that work for them on virtually any type of device they want to access it with. And the web browser really is the defining element. It is the platform that allows you to do so. It does explain why Google got into the browser business, and we'll talk a lot about that through the day. From our perspective, there's really three things that come together to make cloud computing compelling, the three tenets of it. I'm going to talk through each of these. And I'm going to talk about how I believe they can transform a large business over a period of time as they come together. Applications, platforms, and devices. This is, from my perspective, the foundation of cloud computing. So let me talk for a second about the way most of our companies grew up. I call it facilities-based computing. This is how companies were built for 10, 20, 30 years, which is, for the most part, most of their workers worked in a few large facilities. Except for a small number of multinationals, most companies were in one country. Maybe they're in 2 or 3 countries. But they built big facilities where everybody worked. They more or less left at the end of the day and left their work there. Sometimes you had second or third shifts, depending on the nature of your work. But everything was there. When it says firewall here, it's actually a direct reference and also sort of an indirect reference. It's direct in that everything generally has been protected by firewalls. The nature of firewalls and their utility as a means of protecting things is much in debate, even separate from cloud computing. And I think everybody knows firewalls are changing. In people's viewpoints about how to best protect information is changing. But for the sake of argument, think of it as the firewall, but also where you spend your resources and your effort as a company, and where most of your resources, both people resources and technical resources, reside. The facilities-based model was built on a world where people came to work 9 to 5. They did their work amongst a close-knit set of people. They went home at the end of the day. That's not the reality anymore. And in fact, it's not been the reality for even probably 10 or 15 years. So the IT infrastructure that was started like this began to be distorted to really help a company become global, become flexible, become competitive, to deal with contractors, to deal with joint R&D when 2 companies work together. It's tried to map into that world, but it's been very hard. So along comes the first notion of cloud computing. And certain your applications all of a sudden can go outside and be outside this. And the firewall, or again, your focus as a company sort of shrinks a little bit, okay? And you become a little more focused. And you have Salesforce really leading the charge when they launched CRM quite a while ago. You have services like email and collaboration from Google and Microsoft and others. But all of a sudden you have some choices, and sort of the locus of your IT and what you're really trying to spend your dollars and your time on has gotten much more focused. This is the application side. These are just the wholly built applications built by many, many providers now. It's certainly not just us. There's Workday, and there's Zoho, and there's many others. And they've all kind of come in and said, there's more and more of these applications. There's going to be more and more every day. You're going to have a lot of choices. And interesting, there's a lot of great work going on to make them work together quite well, which I won't go into here, but I think it is pretty compelling. Now, platforms really, and it sort of depends on your perspective, but from our perspective, platforms really come along next, which says, look, we're not going to build every application you want. Large businesses do need custom-built applications and workflows. And those two you ought to be able to put outside into the cloud, and you ought to be able to have a lot of flexibility about where you need them and when you need them. If you want to go into Southeast Asia, should not mean you have to go build a data center in Southeast Asia. You ought to have some choices. And that's really what platforms imply. Now, there's a lot of choices of platform. Amazon Web Services, probably the most famous. Force.com from Salesforce, we're out there with App Engine and Microsoft with Windows. So a lot of choices. There will be plenty of choices. But platforms really says it's not just about the packaged apps. They're actually going to be ability to take your own developers and build things just for yourself, as well as get things from smaller companies who you might otherwise not be able to access. And again, the firewall gets a bit smaller, if you will. Now, what about devices? The interesting thing about cloud computing is, as most of your people start to do most of their work in a browser, in a neutral fashion, there's a lot of compelling choices that come into play. All of a sudden, that traditional desktop is not necessarily the answer for everybody. Because a browser-based way of accessing information means all of a sudden, whether it's laptops, whether it's desktops, whether it's phones, et cetera, these can begin to be pushed outside. You can also think of this as things inside that little blue circle are things you own and you manage, and you have to have a return on assets, if you will. Outside that are things you don't necessarily need to own. And this explains a lot why you'll see from Google Chrome OS, which is really an OS designed for cloud computing from the beginning, as opposed to it being something it conceived of later, in our Android mobile system. And these are, to us, very fundamental and will become more and more important to our cloud computing story for the enterprise. You're going to see a lot about Chrome OS and Android today. We have some of the product executives from those areas that are going to speak later today. So at this point, I think it's important to say, first of all, we anticipate that people are going to have data centers, mainframes. IBM mainframes never seem to go away. We don't anticipate they're going to go away. And maybe a lot of things like ERP are going to stay inside, those things that are your core, your focus. And I'm not going to say things that are in someone else's sort of domain of expertise. But we do believe, we're not religious in the sense of thinking entire businesses, certainly Fortune 1000 size businesses are going to move to the cloud. But we think a large fraction of things that you do and manage will go to the cloud. The other important thing I want to say is we fundamentally believe that a proper cloud architecture is going to make your company more secure, not less. Because your people are traveling anyway. They started traveling with laptops years ago. They have been using VPN. They've been using whatever means of accessing information. They've been forwarding their emails to consumer accounts because they can't get proper access. So all sorts of things. They take things away in thumb drives because they need access. They want to use it on their home computer. So all sorts of things just happen. And it's not because anybody's evil. It's because the fundamental architecture was designed for another world, a world where you came to work and went home at 5 o'clock. And we fundamentally believe that the cloud can be more secure because it's designed for this world. And it allows you to have focus on protecting those crown jewels in the middle, but also more secure on the perimeter. And the other thing I would say is it really opens up a lot of possibilities. I like to describe it as the asset-free computing model, right? Actually, Gartner said this a while ago, that a lot of companies are moving towards a bring your own model, bring your own computer, bring your own mobile device. And that absolutely makes traditional IT people's heads spin in a circle to think of the manageability and the security issues with that. The cloud can support that. It's not to say that it won't take some time to get all the pieces and parts together, but we fundamentally believe a model where you, instead of buying somebody a laptop, instead of buying somebody a phone, you can give them a stipend every month and say, decide what makes best sense for you, without, in any sense, compromising the security of the information of your business. So that's a brief overview. We do actually, fundamentally believe the cloud is moving forward and is moving forward fast. And as a lot of bigger companies have moved on to Google and started using Google, we like to call it going Google. They have typically focused on the messaging side of our products, on Gmail, on our calendar product, and on instant messaging, et cetera. And that is because it's really the most mature part of our product. Gmail's been around for 6+ years as a product. And typically they've gotten kind of organic adoption of our docs and our sites products, but it's not really been the focus. Those have been far less mature. So we're actually excited today to announce that we are doing some fairly radical upgrades of our docs products right now. And to go into some depth on this, I'm going to bring on stage Anil Sabharwal, who's a product manager for Google Docs.
Thanks, Dave. How many of you have purchased licenses of Microsoft Office for your business? And how many of you are still deciding whether to upgrade to Office 2010? Great. Well, with today's announcement, I'm excited to let you know that you now have a choice. Now, I'm not saying you're going to stop writing those big checks to our friends at Microsoft. That's completely up to you. But what I am saying is when they come knocking, saying that you need to upgrade to Office 2010, you should know that you now have a choice. A viable replacement for the vast majority of your users that'll provide all the benefits of the upgrade at a fraction of the cost and improve productivity for your business. That choice is Google Docs, with a brand new platform built for better collaboration and future innovation. For those of you who don't know, Google Docs lets you create, share, and collaborate on documents, presentations, and spreadsheets on any computer anywhere in the world. And today, we're announcing new editors for Google Documents and Google Spreadsheets. Built from the ground up with a brand new architecture, these editors take advantage of faster rendering engines in modern browsers, as well as new web standards such as HTML5. And that means powerful new features that were never possible in the browser before, like better document layout and formatting tools, as well as the formula editing bar, autocomplete, and drag and drop columns in spreadsheets, all making it easier for your users to move to the web. We're also making the transition smoother by significantly improving document import fidelity. And that means you can move all of your Microsoft Office files to the cloud with confidence. And they're fast. Client-side web applications that feel and run as fast as client-side applications. And that means you can focus on the things that are important to your business, like better collaboration, the heart of the modern workplace. You don't have to keep sending attachments back and forth, managing different revisions and edits that you have to merge. With Google Docs, everyone works with the same file in real time. So it doesn't matter if you're starting with a new file in the cloud or you're working with one on your desktop. Working as a team in Docs is like having a simple conversation. And today we're announcing real-time, character-by-character collaboration within Google Documents. You can have up to 50 people collaborating on a spreadsheet at the same time. We're also excited to announce a new standalone editor for Google Drawings. That means you can create and collaborate in real time on drawings, schematics, organizational charts, flow charts, and any other type of diagrams. So, brand new architecture, better collaboration, faster performance, better import fidelity, and new features. Make Google Docs a platform that can help your business be more productive than ever. Now, we're also going to be providing very shortly client-side tools that will let you share and collaborate on Office files using the Google Cloud. So all I can say, ladies and gentlemen, is that you now have a choice. Thanks, Dave.
All righty. Thanks, Anil. I think if there's anything we can all agree on, choice is good. Okay? We hope you choose us, but choice is good. That's great. We are going to push forward hard on our apps, on our platform, on our devices. So you can expect to see a lot from Google quite regularly as well. And we're actually very excited about this kind of redo of the Docs architecture because not only is it making the products a lot better right here, right now, but it's actually going to allow us to do a lot more quickly over the next year. So this is not by any means the end. This is really the beginning, we think, of a period of acceleration around our collaborative products. I have one more last thing before I turn it over, and that is really on the mobile side. So with apologies to those on the webcast, we have something very special for you today, which is our Nexus One phone. And I believe these are unlocked GSM, AT&T compatible 3G compatible phones. So I appreciate that some of you actually can't take these or receive these. We intend them really as a way for you to evaluate and use the technology, but we certainly appreciate some of you may have policies against such a thing. But for those who don't and can make great use of this, you actually have on your badge with your name on it a tear-off. You don't have to run out the room now. We've got plenty of them. But during a break or during lunch, anytime during the day where you signed in, where you registered, you're going to have a chance to get your own Nexus One as a show of appreciation for your spending your time with us today. With that was a brief introduction to some of the concepts. You're going to see a lot more what we're going to show today in terms of our products and our roadmap and what we're doing with Chrome OS and Android and the apps themselves. But that was just an overall introduction. So I want to say thank you. I hope this is a great day for you. And I look forward to talking with many of you. Thank you.